So creating a color scheme and using that as a starting point for your copied theme, and then overriding some selected aspects of your theme is the way to go. Now, there are of course more things that you can override. For example, we could also apply a card theme, which will affect all card widgets. And in case you forgot, the card widget is the widget we're using for our expense item here. So for these items in our list of expenses here, they use this built-in card widget, and we can override the default styling of the card widget, which is based on our color scheme, but which might still not be the styling we want, with help of this card theme. This wants a card theme object, just as app bar theme wants an app bar theme object, and just as with the app bar, here I will also copy this. And that's basically always the approach you want to use with theming. You want to copy an existing theme. For the card theme here, we can, for example, target the color parameter alongside other parameters that you could use to fine-tune the look of your cards. And we could set the color here to our color scheme again. And now here, select the secondary container, for example, which is another color that was inferred by Flutter. In addition, we could set the margin to an edge insets object, just as you do it if you configure it right on the widget when you use it. But here you could set up a margin for all the cards used anywhere in your app, if you had a certain default margin that you always want to apply. And you could, for example, here set a base margin that will always be used for all cards of 16. And now here we can also use const and also use const here. And again, save this and enforce this, and now the cards would look like this. And this is actually not bad, but it's a little bit too much spacing between those items for me. Hence, I will actually switch from edge insets all here to edge insets symmetric, and keep the 16 pixels horizontally, but vertically I'll switch to 8 to have a little bit less spacing vertically between my different cards. Yeah, I think that looks better. Now, I also showed you before that you can, for example, set up some default button styles by targeting the elevated button theme. And here we want to create an elevated button theme data object. And on this object, right now at least, there is no copy with method. Instead, here we always have to create a new object, but this object takes only one parameter, the style parameter, which wants a button style object. And here we could create such a style object manually with button style, but then we would again create it from the ground up, which can sometimes be what you want, to have full control over how the button looks. But often the better approach is to use elevated button style from, which again uses Flutter's default styling and then allows you to override some selected styles. Unfortunately, we have inconsistencies like this in the theming system, where sometimes it's copy with and sometimes it's an approach like this. But that's why I'm showing this to you for some of the most important widgets you'll work with. And as always, the official documentation and also simply Google is your friend when it comes to finding out how a specific widget is best themed. Here for buttons, I recommend using style from on the elevated button in this case. And now we can again target some individual style settings for all the elevated buttons in the entire app, because that's always the idea behind theming. You always set up styles for all widgets in the app. And here we could, for example, change the background color of our elevated buttons and set this to K color scheme primary container in my case here. And if I do that and we enforce these changes, you see that now my elevated button here has a more visible background color. Not super prominent, but a bit more visible, which to me looks better than the almost white background color it had before. Now I'm almost done with setting up the theme I want to use for this app here, but there's one last setting I also want to apply here before we then take a look at some other theme-related topics. And the last parameter I want to target here in my general main theme data object is the text theme parameter. Because of course in our application we also have many places where we output text, like for example here in the title. And of course, the default text styles might work for you, but you can of course also fine-tune those. And the best way of fine-tuning them on a global level is to set the text theme parameter in your theme data object. Now this wants a text theme object, and of course, as always, you could create one from the ground up and then target the different kinds of text you might be using in your app manually here. But I personally prefer creating a theme data object here again, and then on that object accessing the text theme. And then on that text theme here, you can again call copy with. This ensures that you're overriding the text theme that belongs to your theme data object here. Now in copy with, you can then target different parameters, and these parameters represent different kinds of texts that are used in different parts of your application. For example, the text used here in the app bar is the title large text. Now, how do I know that? Well, the official documentation, of course, helps with that, but in addition to that, you can also simply try out setting those different text styles and see which texts change in your application. Title large, as mentioned, should allow us to change the text style of all the places where main titles are presented, like in this app bar. And now to change the text style, you have to set a text style object as a value for title large. And of course here you can create one from scratch. Alternatively, you could also access themedata.texttheme.titleLarge and then use copy with to just override selected parts of the text style of your main title. It depends on how much you want to change. Here I'll create a brand new text style, and then we could, for example, change the font weight and change it to font weight normal if we wanted to. We can of course also set the text color, and here I'll use my color scheme and then use on secondary color as a default color here for me, and maybe set the font size to 14. If we do all that and enforce those changes, you see the title now got smaller and is not bold anymore. Now regarding the color, you of course have to be careful because we're also setting a foreground color in our app bar theme, which typically should override any text color you set here. You can prove that if you set it to a color like red, which would be clearly visible. Even though I set it to red here, it's not red here because I have that separate foreground color in my app bar theme. But of course, other places where I use this title large in my application might have a red text color. So here I'll switch back to the other text color, which I actually want to use, but it is important to understand how that works. And with that, I have set up a couple of styles and a couple of theme settings that are automatically picked up by various widgets in this app, as you can tell. And again, definitely feel free to play around with all these settings to get a better feeling for how you can influence the general look of your application. But this is also not all you can do with theming. You cannot just change the general look of your application or of the built-in widgets. Instead, you can also reference settings you made here in your theme data setup from inside your custom widgets to pick up certain styles and override styles in your own widgets based on your general style setup. And that's what we'll do next.